Okay, so while we're waiting for a few more people to come in, I'd like to find out why you guys are here. So why did you decide to come to the enrollment tracking fields deep dive? Anybody want to volunteer to tell me why you're here? Sure.
Work in the budget office, so we receive enrollment
Which
data.
office?
The budget office.
Okay.
So we receive enrollment data and have to do different
Yeah.
analysis.
We're gonna pass around by phone.
Okay, yeah, we have to do different analyses on student data and yeah, we receive enrollment files and try to predict tuition. So
You don't want to tell us why you came? Okay, right over here. You guys can come up too.
Hi, I work in the College Dean's office on what used to be Kim Beckert's team.
Oh, yeah.
And
I started in the College of Liberal Arts.
and
Anyways, I'm sure.
and I am not a data person. I'm not writing queries, but I want to, the more I understand about what exists, the more I can help users in our units so that maybe we get less query requests because it might already exist, and I can help, kind of shepherd people to it.
Absolutely, good. Anyone else want to volunteer to tell us why you decided to come to this session? What your interest is?
I just find enrollment data to be very messy.
You are not wrong. The enrollment data is very messy, and that makes it fun and challenging. It makes it very different from a lot of the data that, demographic data and things like that. It just gets very messy. There's a lot of effective dating. We use PeopleSoft as our student information system. A lot of that's based on effective dating, and that makes for a lot of challenging questions. Which effective date do you want? Do you want effective date in the future? Do you want one as of today? Do you want one as of the term start? So yeah, and aside from the fact that we have how many thousands of staff members entering data into the PeopleSoft system on behalf of our students, and mistakes happen. So that alone also makes it very challenging too. We do a lot of cleanup. I'm in the registrar's office, and so I do a lot of cleanup there too. Okay, it is 1:10, so we're going to officially get started. Let me click my little clock here. Okay, so my name is Christina Smith. I am a business analyst senior in the University Registrar Technology Services. I've been here at ASU since 1996. I started in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences as a front desk receptionist, and I worked my way up there into a lot of different positions, including learning how to run queries, doing some budget stuff, worked with the standards committee, helped develop a very early version of a in-house database that we used to track all the forms that we had to manage. Did a lot of different things there in the college. Liberal arts and sciences is very near and dear to my heart. Then in 2008, I joined the registrar's office as a business analyst, and I'm now a business analyst senior. And I always say that this job was the dream job I never knew I dreamed of having. So it's a lot more than just running reports and doing data. We are subject matter experts. And so we're unique in our team in that we don't only do data, we also are true business analysts, not necessarily just data analysts. And so we work with PeopleSoft. We are very familiar with the functionality there. If students trying to get enrolled and they're running into an unexpected error, we're the ones who get to help troubleshoot and figure out what's going on. Is it on their side? Is it an expected enrollment error? Is it something that's broken in PeopleSoft that we need to fix? Is it something related to one of the modifications to PeopleSoft that we're responsible for? So we get to troubleshoot that. We also do testing, quarterly testing. Well, it's usually twice a year, what we call PUM testing. So when PeopleSoft updates itself, then we have to go through and test and make sure all of our modifications, all of our critical pages work and stuff like that. When we want to create a new mod to help automate a process or something like that in PeopleSoft, then it's usually our team in the registrar's office that's working with that for our team. So that's a little bit of background. Whoopsie. There we go. Just a little reminder about the zero waste endeavors here. So think before you toss. And so a little bit about our agenda. So first, I'm going to review just a few basic foundational things that we need to understand. We're going to talk about the enrollment tracking analytics reports, some basic concepts to understand. And then I'm going to show off a little bit about our enrollment tracking Alteryx workflows. Then we'll dive into the tables that are used in those workflows, and then we'll deep dive into the fields, so there gets to be some technical pieces in there. So don't hesitate to ask questions. I'm fine. I don't expect this presentation to necessarily last the whole 50 minutes, but we'll see how things go. If you want to ask questions as I'm talking about something, please feel free to raise your hand. We'll get you the microphone so you can ask your question. The microphone's for the sake of the recording. And then I'll do my best to answer your question. If we start running short on time, then I may ask you to wait until the end, but we'll go ahead and try to do questions along the way as we can. All righty. So first, let's go into our short review here. So if you're not already familiar with it, in the enrollment and records group in the analytics site, we have an enrollment tracking reports page. And so you see a bunch of different types of reports that we have here, as well as a little graphic for tracking student enrollment. We have comparison reports. We have current reports. And then we have class funding reports that also have comparison and current versions of those as well. So now we're going to talk about some other concepts. So I mentioned current or comparison. So a current report means that it is enrollment data as of today's date. And that's all there is to it. It's how many people are enrolled today. It's current. Comparison is also showing you I should also say that's also for the current enrolling terms. Okay. The comparison data is actually the same in that it is for today's date, but it is comparing the current enrollment term to the prior like term. And so when I say like term, I mean spring to spring, fall to fall, summer to summer. We don't ever do fall to spring in this type of a report. Not to say there's not reasons to do that, but here we don't. So another concept to understand and to always think about in your reports is your point in time. I always love to talk about time traveling. These reports really don't time travel. They are as of today. You look at the data today, that's what's on there. You go look at it tomorrow, you cannot go back and look at what the data was yesterday. And so even with the comparison reports, even though we are traveling in the sense that we're looking back at a prior term, it is still as of today's date. And so we're comparing today's date, and the way we calculate the dates is that it's from the first day of classes. And so the first day of classes is day 0. Before that is going to be -1, 2, 3, etc. And then we also have weeks, and then forward, of course, +1, 2, 3, etc. And so if today is day -66, then for the prior term, we're looking at day -66 to compare those two together. The next concept that I want to talk about is headcount by major. And sorry, now I need to catch up to my notes here. So headcount by major means that we are counting students based on the academic plan or major of their primary record. We'll talk more about primary record a little bit later. In a few cases, it's going to be a student who's only enrolled in a certificate or maybe even an associate's degree. How many did not know that we are now offering associate's degrees here at ASU? Surprise, we are. There are specialized programs right now, but yeah, we do actually have a few. So that's headcount by major. So the key is it's, well, I'll get to that in a minute. class funding. So the next key point to talk about, class funding is counting students based on the classes they are attending. And so that's the simplest kind of place to start to understand what class funding is. Now, I want to dive in a little bit deeper into this head count by major. And so we're going to focus in on the head count by campus of a student's major. When you're looking at head count by campus of the student's major, the campus is the campus affiliated with the student's major. But this doesn't mean the student is taking all of their classes on this campus. The one exception is going to be, of course, ASU Online. Those are all going to be ASU Online classes. But it is possible for a student to be counted here under the Tempe campus, but they might be taking a class or two over at Poly, you know, maybe even several of them. So that's an important key to understand and disassociate that. The other thing about campus too that I want you to have in the back of your head as we continue on talking about this is that depending on the report, campus is going to mean different things. And going to be talking about some very specific data points. So whenever you are, say, asked to do a report of students by campus, be curious, ask questions, drill into that. What's your definition of campus? What do you mean by campus? How you know, campus of who or what? That may be a confusing question when people don't realize that there's multiple definitions of it, but there really are. So a good data analyst is always asking lots of questions. Why do you need this data? The keynote speakers today did a great job talking about this, I think. Why do you need this data? What are you going to use it for? How are you going to use it? You know, do you plan to use it again for something else? Always drill into that because that really can help you get them exactly what they need and serve them better. Tangent, sorry. Okay. So there's my point about the campus of the student's major. Now let's talk about class funding. The class funding reports are looking, whoops, sorry. Okay, well, so campus in the class funding reports are coming from the class attributes in the schedule of classes. And so this is a page of the maintained schedule of classes in PeopleSoft. You may or may not have ever seen this page. Does this look familiar to anybody who works in PeopleSoft, has done class scheduling? So the key thing when we're talking about class funding, the funding comes from the class attributes that's there at the bottom of the page. And so that's what identifies the campus that a class funding report is going to count. You'll notice here in this first example, the location is also in Tempe and the campus for the schedule is also. Here's another example of a different course. Again, it's Tempe funded, but note the location is a polytechnic. So this class is being taught at Poly, but it's going to be counted under Tempe. And you guys probably can't see that because of that thing blocking. I don't know if I can get it to move. Can you move the, you don't even see it. Never mind. Okay. Moving on, guys. Sorry about that. That's going to be blocking some of the screenshots. There we go. Okay, so a little bit more about class funding. So here on this side of the screen here, the class funding headcount, we're looking at the student level and the student's academic level, and the classes they're enrolled in. But again, drilling into the campus totals, we are looking at the funding campus. So again, separate from campus of the student's major, this is the class funding campus. For the SCH and FTE report here on this side, and by the way, just in case you don't know, SCH is student credit hour, FTE is full-time equivalent. These are used to compare ASU's numbers to like other institutions to give us kind of an apples to apples comparison is what those are usually used for. So the campus in the funding campus is the campus of the funding campus of the class, but also note that the academic career is the career of the class and not the student. So here on this side, when you're looking at undergraduate, that is talking about an undergraduate class, not an undergraduate student. The course level is also referring to the class. So that is a lower division class or an upper division class or a graduate class. It is not an undergraduate student. So this means that in theory, you could have a graduate student who's enrolled in an undergraduate class being counted in those undergraduate totals. Okay. All righty. So again, don't hesitate to stop me if you have questions or if any of this doesn't make sense to you guys. Now let's talk about the enrollment tracking Alteryx workflows. So all of these enrollment tracking reports start from these Alteryx workflows. They then go into a user AUDB table, and then those tables are what are tied into the report builder reports that actually create these. We have 3 Alteryx workflows that drive these enrollment tracking reports. We have a current enrollment tracking workflow, and we have a comparison enrollment tracking workflow. Those have to be separate because they are using separate tables. We'll dive into that more a little bit later. We also have here in the bottom a summary enrollment tracking workflow. Both of the current and comparison workflows have CSV outputs. That is by row data, and we found that if you're trying to create a Power Query report using one of those CSV outputs, it didn't work very well coming out of especially the comparison report. There's just too many rows for it to refresh in a timely manner. Especially if you need to get a report out to your dean first thing in the morning, So we created the summary workflow that summarizes the totals for you and then gives you an output, a CSV output that you can then use and gather your data a little bit more quickly. So that's a little bit background about those. Our workflows, we build these maybe a little bit differently than some of what you have seen in some other examples. These are the in-database tool set. We build these queries this way because it's a little bit closer to the way we're used to building these in the old Hyperion Studio. So we're pulling in each individual table, adding filters and formulas and so on as we're going through this. And so this ends up being a little bit easier for my team to maintain than some of the other ways that other folks might manage these Alteryx workflows. And it still runs fine for us. That's what I'll say about that. We also have the in-memory section of these. So we're adding a lot of, and so again, both of these workflows have the in-memory sections. This is where we create a lot of additional custom fields and we manage a few other pieces that are required for actually some of the parameters in our reports. The current and comparison workflows each create 2 AUDB tables that are going to 2 different schemas and multiple CSV files. And so there's a total of 6 outputs in each workflow. So let's talk a little bit about the AUDB tables. The tables that you would use would be the Enroll Records ENT or Enterprise schema. The current workflow creates the Enrollment Tracking Current and the Enrollment Tracking Current Detail table. The comparison workflow creates also the Enrollment Tracking Comparison and Enrollment Tracking Comparison Detail. So again, very similar, but one's based on current data, one is based on comparison data. Now, so let's talk about granularity. The enrollment tracking comparison and the enrollment tracking current is going to be 1 row per student per term. The enrollment tracking comparison detail and the enrollment tracking current detail are both going to be 1 row per student per term per class number that they're enrolled in, and subplan if the student has multiple subplans. So because the detail outputs, the class numbers will be duplicated if the student has multiple subplans. So 1 class number for each so you'll see the same class number on each of the subplans. And so you'll get duplicate data if you're not aware of it. If you don't need to identify subplans and you're using these detail tables, you'll want to filter the ASU prime record flag to Y to remove those duplicates. Okay, so now let's talk about the tables. So this is a custom table that we had developed specifically for our enrollment reports. This is the first table in both workflows. It is designed to do the heavy lifting of identifying the desired enrollment tracking reporting terms and the comparison week or day for today. I ordered these in a certain way to try to hopefully order these and sort of these, hopefully make it a little bit easier to understand what each of these do. The comparison term field groups like terms who are being compared. So that's why you see two for, 2 rows for each of those. The S term field is the term code. We have 1 year worth of terms in here, plus the comparison term. So a total of 6 terms is all you'll ever find in this table. And it only goes back to that 1 term. We did originally try to do go back an extra year, but the workflows wouldn't run. It was too much data. The active enrollment term identifies the actively enrolling current terms. So you'll see that the spring and fall fall 23 and spring 24 are the 2 actively currently enrolling terms. The active comparison term flag identifies the current comparison terms. And so that's the comparison terms where we have the 2 terms for spring. So the spring is comparing to spring of last year and fall is comparing to fall of last year. The term sequence number allows for filtering to current versus comparison. And then the summer flag helps us identify the summer terms. The created date time reflects the last updated date time for that row in the table. The term sort allows for sorting all of the terms. They're out of sort order right now because I wanted to show these in a different grouping. And then the last 3 fields are term labels that are used in the reports. So these are specific to our reports. If you're wanting to use the same labels as ours, this gives those to you. Okay, so let's talk about the primary tables that are used in these. The primary tables used in all the enrollment tracking reports are going to be the student profile major term, student profile term, student enroll, A class, and D person view. The comparison workflow uses the snapshot version of these tables, and the current workflow uses the non-snapshot version of these tables. And note the different naming of each of these. So here on your right side is going to be the snapshot tables. So be aware of those and take note of that if you need to know the difference between those. So speaking of student profile, a little promo here for my boss, Jennifer Hornsby. In the session right after this one, she is going to be doing a session about student profile. So if you want to really deep dive into this table, please stay and check out her presentation. It's really helpful, especially if you're very interested in this data. There's a lot of good information there. There's going to be a few specific fields that I'm going to drill into a little bit more, a little bit later here. Next table is a census table. So this is the CS Desker academic plan. We like to call this one of our favorite tables. It's a very helpful one. This table, it provides many of the friendly descriptions in the enrollment tracking reports. And so for the plans and the departments and all of that is all here. We usually, so another concept that we could talk about really quickly. There's a little footnote at the bottom of all of our reports that you'll see that says that the organizational structure represents the structure for the current year. So as you all know, we do a lot of reorgs here at ASU for different reasons. To get the current organizational structure, we do a max effective dated subquery on the term code here. And then that's what we pull in to get those descriptions. But keep in mind that we're doing that for that very specific end result, to have the name of the departments and colleges match. So if department is renamed and reorged, we're going to use the name here and compare it to what it was. It's still going to be pulling in the data from what it was before, but under this new name and matching that way. So you can actually see the comparison still for the year before when it wasn't reorged. I hope that made sense. The last table is actually an AUDB table, and it is it's in the, again, enrollment records enterprise schema, and it's a campus table. And this one provides campus descriptions, sorting, and groupings used in the enrollment tracking reports. So of note, we recently updated the west to West Valley, and downtown to downtown Phoenix. And so we were asked by our leadership to change those names, and they are now changed in this table, and then that allows it to flow down into our reports more or less easily. There's a few hiccups, but it worked. Okay. We're going to deep dive now into the fields. Any cat lovers? Alrighty. I want to talk a little bit about a couple of key fields in the student profile major term. So I'm going to read some of the definitions to these fields. Billing career. Billing careers are undergrad, grad, and law, and it's used for tuition calculation. And so you have your regular academic career that the student's enrolled under, and then you have their billing career. There may be some instances where a student is in two different careers, and you may see an undergrad with a grad billing career because of the grad career that they're also enrolled in. Sometimes they'll still be undergrad, grad, and grad. There's all kinds of different reasons and combinations for all that. But the key here is that it's used for tuition calculation. And so another theme to pick up on is enrollment tracking tends to follow the money. And so you see that played out in a lot of ways, and in a lot of the fields that we use, it's intentionally designed to track who's funding that student, who's paying for that student. The next field is the ASU primary record flag. This flag indicates if the academic career program and plan is primary for the student in a term. You limit this to a Y to get a distinct head count. And this matches the ABOR head count classification. The ASU primary academic career flag indicates if the academic career is the student's primary career in that term. If the student has multiple careers, the career having enrollment is primary. If the student is registered in multiple careers, then the billing career has primacy. If the student has multiple billing careers, then law has primacy, then grad, then undergrad. This matches the ABOR classification, headcount classification. Okay. ASU primary program flag. This flag indicates if the academic program is the student's primary program in the term. And again, this matches the tuition calculation process. So that table was the student profile major term table. You're going to see multiple rows per plan that the student has for each student in term in that table. The next table is the student profile term. Yes, question? Let me get you the microphone just a minute. I'll go back to the last one. Thank you for coming up.
Taking notes seriously, so I just wanted to.
It's all recorded.
Thank you. Could you repeat what you said about for primary record flag, how you know which takes primary over the other one?
You mean the primary academic career?
For the primary record
So the
flag.
primary record, the flag indicates if the academic career program and plan is primary for a student in a term. So you limit this to a Y to get a distinct head count. Yep. Okay. So student profile term. So here you're going to have one row per student per term. So the granularity is a little bit different. There's some very specific fields in this table that are used for head count and class funding, for class funding head count and SCH and FTE. So state funded, you'll see in our reports, we intentionally call this state reported, but it's the same thing. So the ASU state funded flag, this flag indicates that the student is enrolled in at least one state funded class and is not in a self-reported program that must be excluded. You limit this to Y to get state funded head count. This field is not populated prior to 2007, of fall 2007. ASU exclude from state. So this is a self-reported flag. This flag indicates if the student is in a self-supported program and excluded from state-funded enrollment reports, even if that student is enrolled in state-funded classes per ABOR. Okay. Then we have the state-funded units. This is the number of units the student is enrolled in that are state-funded. For students who are not in self-supported programs, that must be excluded. This field is not populated also not populated prior to fall of 2007. Who knows why it's not populated before fall of 2007? PeopleSoft, that's when we started PeopleSoft. Yep. You'll see that in a lot of data. And then we have the ASU Tempe unit taken. And so this is a campus funding flag. This shows did I skip one? No. Number of units the student is enrolled in that are state funded and Tempe campus funded. For students who are not in self-supported programs, that must be excluded. Again, not prior to fall of 2007. And then there is the ASU enroll status, Tempe. Enrollment status in state funded, Tempe campus funded classes for students who are not in self-supported programs that must be excluded. The values here are E for enrolled, D for dropped, W for withdrawn, and has a W grade. N is never enrolled. And I do think I skipped the ASU enroll state all flag. So that's actually the same as I just read as the Tempe only is for all. For the last two, the ASU Tempe unit taken and the ASU enroll status state Tempe, the T stands for Tempe. There are also the same versions for West, Poly, and downtown, but only for those 4 campuses. So those fields come up later in some of the formulas we're going to talk about. So I did want to make sure that I discussed them just at least a little bit and made you aware of the base table that they're in. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about the workflow filters. The comparison and current workflows have identical filters with a few differences highlighted in orange here. You'll recall in our discussion about the enrollment comparison terms that we mentioned that the term sequence number field, the comparison workflow is pulling back both sequences, while the current workflow is only pulling back sequence 1. So we're filtering on those sequences to get the terms that we want. Major term to enroll students, we are also filtering to the primary academic career and primary academic program. We use these filters because some of the parameters in the enrollment tracking reports allow for drilling down to the subplan level, and these filters allow for identification of multiple subplans when they exist for a particular student. And so that's why we're not filtering to the primary record flag at this level. So that's just some of the basic filters that are in the Redshift tables at the start of the workflow. So first I'm going to talk about the in-database functions that are used in the Alteryx workflow. Some of the these are the most used functions. So we use case when statements, substrings, concatenation, null value. There's a few comments that we also add to help us remember important points about the formula. Why we maybe excluded something or XYZ. I see everybody looking at that. Okay. So some key in database formulas. So we're going to talk about the student state reported, campus of major, NRC, which is new, returning, continuing, RNI, which is resident, non-resident, and international, career, and academic level. And we're at 30 minutes, so I'm going to try to step this up a little bit. Okay, student state reported. So this happens in 2 steps. Note that I'm using the table names from the current workflow for these examples. They're a little bit more easier to remember. But remember, the comparison still uses the snapshot version of these same tables. To identify a student as state reported, we first have to figure out if any of the classes they are enrolled in are state reported classes. So we'll talk through the formula. The when statement is finding fall or spring by saying not equal to summer, basically. And so the substring is looking at the term code and getting that last digit that identifies the term. Or the semester, whether it's fall, spring, or summer. The state funded flag, that is Y. And if the excluded from state is N, and the class state funded is Y. So there's a class state funded flag in two places. It's in the student profile term, but it's also in the A class extended table, or just the plain old A class table. And so we want both of those to be Y in this case. Or if the term is summer, then Y, else N. So what that's doing is, even though summer is not state funded, to help make it to where we don't have to be flipping filters and stuff like that around in the different reports just to accommodate summer, we pretend like summer is all state funded just to make that easier. So that's why that does that flip for summer. And so this finds everything state funded, and then in summer it's just pulling back everything. So that's the first half, but so notice that the name of this is class state reported. So we're looking for the state funded classes. So step 2, we're finding the max class state reported value. So it's looking alphabetically for the N or the Y for each student in term. This gives us our student state reported field with a Y or an N value. So that's how the Alteryx workflow is doing that. Okay. Campus of major. This I was comparing the this computed item to what I had last year, and it realized it has grown a little bit because we had to kind of accommodate some bad data. Okay, so this formula is producing the desired campus code that is associated with the student's major. This in turn joins to data from the AUDB campus table to get our description, sorting, and the groupings for the campuses. The campus from the student profile major term table is the campus that shows in PeopleSoft in the student's program plan stack. This value can be changed by advisors and may or may not be the same as the campus the major reports under. The census table, Desker Academic Plan, identifies the correct reporting campus for the Tempe, West, Poly, and downtown campuses. So this formula is first looking for campuses in student profile major term that are not Tempe, West, Poly, or downtown, and where the census campus code is not UNIV or null. We then want the student profile campus values in these cases. But first, we have to correct one value and make any campus value of GLBAC to be online. So we group all those in there if they show up. So these values that we do want from the student profile table are basically going to be online in all of the campus locations other than Tempe, West, Poly, or downtown. Otherwise, we want the value to be the campus code from the census table. However, before we get to that last else statement indicating as such, which is a little covered by the transcript there, there's a few little, we have to account for some possible instances of missing values where either of these campus fields are a dash or null. That's usually as a result of bad data, and what happens is it shows up as an other and messes up our report, and our reports are delayed when we're doing our weekly reports, and life's, miserable. But we do regular cleanup reports beforehand, but even then there's stuff that can happen overnight. So it's never perfect, is it? Okay. So next let's talk about NRC. I had to put this one on 2 slides. This formula is providing us with the desired descriptions for the new returning, continuing, or NRC groupings in the enrollment tracking reports. All of these fields are from the student profile major term table. So it's a pretty straightforward case one statement. The main items of note are the new values that have been added for the first year associate and the new transfer associate. So note that we're using education level to identify students who are pursuing an associate's degree. We use education level specifically because there's AA, AS, all these different versions of an associate's degree. As things get added to that list, if we just find education level 10, that makes our life a whole lot easier. So also note we're using an academic plan code to identify new visiting university students. So we separate those out from the new non-degree students. That started right around the pandemic. So the next two lines here at the top are for the last two undergrad values of returning and continuing. And then we get into the graduate students. For the graduate students, note we're using degree to separate out the new degree seeking graduate students and the new non-degree graduate students. So note that the descriptions like these will, when requested by executive leadership, be changed. I kind of mentioned this last year. I made the statement that what's nice about these workflows is that it allows us to make these changes quickly and then have the desired values just magically filter down to our reports. Having actually been through that twice in the last few months, both with adding the associates and then adding the new campus values, we had a few road bumps. It's not quite as smooth as that in reality, but it still does help the process go a lot quicker. So yeah, that's all I'll say about that. So let's talk about R&I. This formula provides descriptions used in the enrollment tracking reports for Arizona resident, non-resident, and international students. First, the formula identifies students with a minority status not equal to X in residency equal to res as an Arizona resident, and then the same for non-resident. And then finally, students with a minority status of X are all identified as international. Career, these are straightforward formulas, descriptions used in the enrollment tracking reports. However, the key point that I wanted to show you here is that there are 3 different career fields in these data sets. One that groups graduate and law students together as a graduate, one that splits out graduate and law, and finally the course career. So when you're looking at these tables, pay attention to which career you're actually looking at. Academic level. While the academic level description is available in the student profile major term table, this formula accounts for some specific scenarios and counts students into the correct reporting group. Undergraduate students with an academic program of UGPR or an ASU exchange student type that isn't blank are counted in the non-degree undergraduate level. These requirements for this criteria change depending on if it's a summer term or not. Also, if the student is missing an academic level, they are classified as a senior. This is usually the result of bad data, and in most cases, these students should be seniors anyways. So the UGPR and the exchange students, the reason why they are counted as non-degree students is they're never really going to get a degree here at ASU, and so that's the way that this has always been categorized. So there you go. Okay, so now let's talk about the in-memory functions used. We have a couple of versions of the if-then statements. There's a few regex, replace functions in there, and then left, right, and length as well. So those are the most common ones that we're using. Okay, so we're going to talk about the class funding headcount reports, the hour bands and headcount campuses, and the class funding SCH and FT reports, the classification and SCH campus. So hour bound happens in 2 steps, or excuse me, 3 steps. And actually, I have one more thing I wanted to say on that. So we're not going to be able to really dig too deeply into some of these formulas, but what I want, the key takeaway I want you to grab from this is how these formulas feed into each other kind of conceptually, and how there's multiple to kind of get to the end result. Oops. Okay, so step one. So note that the output here is the EMPL ID. This is because we count the EMPL IDs in the report groupings to get our aggregated totals. Also note that the formula is repeated for all of the groupings that we need by campus. So we have an all hours 0 to 6, all hours 7 to 11, 12 or more, and then we do Tempe 0 to 6 and all the same repeated, and then again for West, Poly, and downtown. Step two, here we're further identifying the campus grouping used, looking at the ASU enroll status state for the campus. So we talked about these fields earlier. That's why I wanted to discuss those. All these fields are coming from the student profile term table like we discussed. Finally, we have our final hour band descriptions that are actually used in these reports. So all that to get to that. I was just in an Alteryx session before this, and I am starting to wonder if there's some easier ways that we can do this without so many steps, but this was the way we did it when we first implemented it, and it does work, so. The headcount campus field is an aggregated field used in the parameter of the class funding headcount report. And so keep in mind, you're looking at your parameters at the top of the report. It's used in this parameter up here. Students can be enrolled in classes with different campus funding. So this field allows the parameter to find all values that contain Tempe, for example, and thus will find all of the students enrolled in Tempe campus funded classes. So here on the right, you'll see some examples of the various combinations of what students are enrolled in. Tempe, West, Poly, and downtown. Don't ask me how they do that, but apparently at least one does. But then the parameter kind of like has a container that says, show me everything that has Tempe in it, and then allows you to find all the Tempe classes ones. So that's kind of a smart way to solve that problem. Classification. The key here that I wanted to point out is that there are actually two different fields called classification used in the SCH and FTE class funding reports. The first version groups students enrolled in 6 units or less as unclassified. Then if the student has 7 or more units as resident or non-resident, the second version expands on this by splitting the unclassified group into resident and non-resident as well. And last but not least, SCH campus. This formula provides campus descriptions used on the SCH FTE class funding report. That's all there is to it, other than now we got West Valley and downtown Phoenix. That is actually it, with 5 minutes to spare. Does anybody have questions? Or are you all just kind of glazed over and going, what? All righty. My team, again, is the University Registrar Technology Services. We're known as RegTech. If you have any questions about any of our enrollment tracking reports or any of our reports that are in the enrollment records group, or if you're trying to find a report, you're more than welcome to email urtech@asu.edu. That's the best way to get a hold of us. That does go into our Salesforce queue. There's always someone on that. I'm actually on Salesforce today. Supposed to be watching my tickets come in. So yeah, so if you have any questions, feel free to contact us there. My email address is christina.smith@asu.edu. That is CHRISTINA.SMITH. There is a Christina Smith on downtown West Campus and works in IT down there. She spells her name CHRISTINA.Smith. So she's my doppelganger. So pay attention to how you're spelling Christina. If you're trying to email me directly, but I would prefer you send it to URTech. So if I'm out, you can find me. That's it, guys. Thank you.